You have no idea, dear listener, viewer, how much bother we've gone to this morning to have myself and Pat here for your pleasure. Am I correct, Pat? Have we not strained muscle and might and main?
This is third time looking for this soon.
Technological things are beyond me, and I think they're fairly well beyond you too. However, let's move to a matter that's well, it's an interesting one. I haven't actually heard it, but the story is that Matthew O'Toole was on the Nolan show. I'm not sure, was it TV or was it radio?
Radio.
Radio. And there was some question of his wording or comment on, I think it was the Loyalist Community Council or that, whatever that body's called. And that Nolan stopped him talking because he felt that that was in danger of overstepping the mark in terms
dangerous territory or something.
Legalities. I hope it was that. I hope it was legalities he was talking about and nothing else. But I think it raises the broader question, Pat, that, you know, if you've got someone who's running a political show, they do need to have access to the politicians. And as far as I know, at least I haven't heard them. I have neither heard the SDLP, nor the DUP, nor the Sinn Féin, nor the UUP on his show for ages. It's gotten to be more of a consumer program now. It seems to me, certainly I listened to him this morning, more of a consumer program than a political one.
Jude, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What did you say?
Go ahead yourself. There's a time lag here.
Jude, I saw this morning that the SDLP said they're continuing the boycott of the program until the matter of Matthew O'Toole is resolved. Now the BBC have said that they claim they've done a probe. The old one on the police investigate the police. You always go, well, the BBC said O'Toole was or Nolan was justified. Now the SDLP obviously take a very different view. And so the boycott's continuing now. So the way I was thinking about it, against the background of what's happening in Dublin and about the whole thing about public service broadcasting, it came into my head. The SDLP are not on. They're boycotting. Sinn Féin are boycotting. I'm not sure about the UUP, and
I'm not sure
DUP. I haven't heard them on too often either. But I think the UUP might not be boycotting. But anyway, Jude, here's the bottom line. Let's get it. And a divided society. BBC is supposed to be allegedly a public service broadcaster. Impartiality is the keystone of the whole operation. And I'm wondering to myself, how a man who claims he's got the biggest show in the country can claim that he's representing everybody when the elected representatives of the two main nationalist parties are boycotting his show. Do you know how the BBC management sort of can say this is justified, etc., etc., etc.? And I'd love to know how the BBC charter works when somebody would ask legitimate questions and saying, how has the public service remit been met when it seems that only representatives from one community are on his show? But Jude, there's a sort of the Jerry Springer element to Nolan, and because he gets a big audience and so on, it seems to be that the BBC are turning a blind idea. And the final point, Jude, his claim, Nolan, he keeps saying the biggest show in the country. Jude, let's get that nailed for a starters. He's the biggest show in the smallest part, 6 counties of the island of Ireland. Big deal. Anyway, that's enough from me.
Well, I really haven't much to add to that, other than that I'm not sure, did Sinn Féin give a reason why they weren't on? My suspicion is, now I don't know, I'm subject to correction, but my suspicion is, I know some Republicans believe that Nolan has a tendency to encourage, knock him down, drag him out, conflict on the program. You'll have A and the polar opposite Z, and then the two will be on the air clashing. And that's just like a bear pits experience, and that they figure that that's not much point. Now, I'm not sure if that's a Sinn Féin official policy, but I have heard that line.
If I remember correctly, can I cut in there? It was, if I am, and I am open to correction this, it was around the Bobby Story funeral thing. Nolan, the police said they were happy with what they had done. The Northern Ireland office said they were happy with what they had done. The Secretary of State, as far as I remember, said he was happy with what Nolan kept it going day after day after day after day. it was almost like a bash and Féin nonstop. Where and any other had it been London or when the Metropolitan Police or the Birmingham Police or anybody else sort of said, "Look, we've done X, Y, and Z," and the government and the other, like nobody else was. So I think Sinn Féin took except the fact and said, "This is sort of a tirade against us, and we're not playing ball with it."
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
I
Nolan kept
personally
going
think it's very bad.
single-handedly for about what's that?
Yeah, I was going to say that if I were in Nolan's shoes, I'd be pretty disappointed by that because I would be relying on he is known for his ability to get on and interview and sometimes give a good rough interview to various politicians. To be honest, he gives a fairly rough ride to many unionist politicians as well as to nationalists or Republicans. But I don't see how he can survive as a program if he doesn't have them coming, for whatever the reason may be.
But Jude, that's the point. That's the very point I'm getting. I don't know how I survived for about 2 years with well, certainly the best part of a year with nobody from the nationalist community. And if you work the, down to the very basics of the whole idea of BBC being impartial, public service, and all the rest, I would like an explanation how the bosses at BBC Northern Ireland can sort of say this is sustainable or this is acceptable.
Well, I think to be fair to Nolan, I listened to him this morning, for example, and he was on about this idea of polluted earth. Apparently, if you put ashes of coal, if you mix those into the ground, that somehow makes the ground toxic, and people build on top of that. And he's effectively, him and Sam McBride were saying that was a kind of a time bomb in a way for people. There was a lot of places very unhealthy. The ground is very unhealthy, filled with toxins, and that people weren't aware of this, and this should be made. So a big consumer story, and he's gone off on holidays now, but he's coming back, and he says that's something he's going to go after, just as he went after RHI. I have a feeling he might be forced to move into the consumer area like that, rather than the political. Although, who knows? Who knows? When the elections come up, I guess. Well, it'll be a long time. When's the next election, by the way? So that's about 4 years from now, isn't it?
But let me just, no, another one of the things he said, I read there over the weekend. He said that the boycotts were not affecting the listenership from the nationalist community. And I was thinking, I don't know, and the thought had occurred to me during and I think mentioned before. No way we all want to go past in a quick car crash. We all rubberneck to see what's happening. That doesn't mean we agree with what we see. And I think as far as Nolan's concerned, not appearing in his show is certainly not affecting the performance of Sinn Féin of the local government elections or anything to go by.
Well, I wonder why. I mean, we'll leave it now, but I wonder how does he know that there's been a maintenance of the nationalist listenership? I mean, surely there aren't figures where the person gathering the poll asks you, what's your religion? I don't think that's possible.
But you'd like, no, but the point I'm making is certainly not appearing on no is doing Sinn Féin no harm. If they've gone up in the last election, they went way up. So maybe staying off the Nolan show is actually helping them. So much for Nolan's.
So you want to be a success, stay off the Nolan show. Okay. Let's move to the this famous bill that they're pushing through, and it's going to affect all sorts of things, but it's going to affect Gerry Adams because he was due to be his case for. Was it in Long Cash? Be put in Long Cash, and it wasn't signed off by the Secretary of State. It was somebody else, and that was illegal. And therefore, going to get compensation.
Official, Jude, as far as Gerry had taken a case, and I think it ended up in the Supreme Court where he might have lost it. But originally, one of the what happened was, Jude, as you well remember, the internment was a disaster on every. They just basically a bigoted drool. Or anybody in the nationalist community, if you're seen to be even the least bit Republican or nationalist, way back in 1971, you were lifted under this. People who'd never done anything wrong in their life, you weren't even allowed to, just if you had said some policeman had heard you said, so you were lifted held him on internment and various, or even on, was it the Maidstone or something, the boat. Anyway,
Yes.
bottom line of it all is, Jerry Adams took a case for unlawful detention and sought compensation for this. And one of and I one part of it was the technical, but that for his arrest, the warrant should have been signed by the Secretary of State. It was actually signed by some junior official or other, and the courts ruled that that was illegal. So, that opened the doors for others. I think 400 came piling on behind Jerry then after this, and they were all seeking compensation.
For the same
So
reason.
now the bottom line.
For the same reason, Pat. For the same
For the
reason.
same reason that for the same reason that they were held illegally and etc. Now Jerry tried to escape a couple of times from from internment, and apparently, I think if I remember correctly, the Supreme Court said that ruled him out of any compensation. But the other 400 or 399 probably had a case. But they're now, Lord Kane has introduced amendments in at Westminster to prevent anybody getting any compensation, and it looks like that'll be rolled through by the old Conservative majority at the next. And now that maybe the House of Lords might block some of this, but did you know the whole thing, the wider thing about the legacy bill? It's opposed by all the parties in Northern Ireland, by Dublin, even by the EU and by the Americans. And Jude, let's put it on the record for one more time. This is a cover up by the British state to cover their misdeeds and malevolent behaviour on certain aspects of the troubles in the north, and that's what this is about. And anybody says it's, they're, as I heard Lord Kane words, trying to justify it, like it's 50 years have passed. They've blocked everything: inquests, civil cases, failed to produce evidence, claimed security status for evidence, that other evidence they didn't want. Tried to claim the role of, and farmers didn't play a key role in some of the things and all that. So, Jude, we all know what the legacy bill about, but this is the latest one, Jude.
Well, I
apparently
think
anybody who was just lifted. Go ahead, Jude.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm surprised that there aren't people in the journalist trade that haven't gone after that consistently, because I mean it sort of strikes right at the heart of things, doesn't it? If you say that the state is breaking the law and conspiring with criminals to have people killed, I mean that is, you cannot get a bigger story than that. Yet we all know that happened. I mean, Anne Cadwallader's book lists cases, and yet you only occasionally get the odd journalist who will concede that or mention it, and then they'll move on to something else. It's astonishing, absolutely astonishing. Now, whether it is that I'm exaggerating how awful the thing was that has happened, or whether it is that the journalists are fearful of going up a blind alley and being, their reputations being diminished as a result. But it really does seem to me that case, that whole case of the state doing illegal things, big and small, that should happen and not be, the house not being on fire as a result.
Yeah, I can't remember who was it said. There was some Republican I read. He said when they were talking about things like steak knife, he said for years it was claimed, the IRA were running this nutting squad. He says they weren't. He says the British state was running the nutting squad, and they decided who lived and who died. Because they were running steak knife and they were running at least possibly one other member of that nutting gang. Yeah. So he said it wasn't the IRA were running them. So that whole thing raises and it goes right to the top. It goes right to the top of the British. A lot of this had to be signed off by ministers, if not the Prime Minister. So how far up it goes, it'd be very interesting. So the British should look at the things. You would, in the Republic, if somebody dies in odd circumstances, if it's not clearly sort of a legal incident, there's a coroner's court where there's an inquiry held about the circumstances. And then the coroner's courts might decide, look, this is not a matter for the coroner's court, it's a criminal investigation, and they sign off on it. See, in Northern Ireland, people have been waiting for 40 and 50 years for a coroner's court for their loved ones. And then when they go to even try to get evidence, the state won't provide the evidence or any sort of fact. And various secretaries of state have signed orders preventing the furnishing of information on the basis of the security situation. In other words, maybe an informant would be named or something like that. So
Mm.
the whole thing is one big mess where the state is. I know this for years, Jude. If you or I read any books in the past, we get this thing where the British state were the honest brokers in the middle, fighting those mad Irish bastards over there. And that's basically the terms that were used. And we were the good, honest guys. Jude, they were up to their eyeballs with the loyalist community, and they were not impartial.
That doesn't surprise me. But what does surprise me is how successfully a considerable number of nationalists, mild nationalists, would have gone along with that. Whenever SDLP
Yeah.
were in the majority, as distinct from Sinn Féin, when Sinn Féin would bring up conspiracy stuff, they would say, typical, that's propaganda, really. It's only now that Sinn Féin has become the big party that we're beginning to see that actually what they were saying was true. It was pretty appalling,
Absolutely.
and it was true. So the day of respectable people saying, well, the British forces can be tough, but that's how it is with terrorists. The day when
remember no, sorry for cutting. I remember the days. Anyone in the nationalist community, even the most mild-mannered person, who said, "Wait a minute, this is like Anne Cadwallader produced that Lethal Allies book, and it's chapter and verse of what happened. She would have been smeared as a Republican sympathizer. Anybody like me and you, if we come out saying what happened, we're Republican sympathizers. But now, as you say, years ago, any and all people were just smeared.
Mm.
And that's why so many people didn't do it. And now it's
Yeah.
all coming out, but just a lot of the people are dead. The evidence is gone. It's too late for so many people. But now there's a big admission. Yeah, this did happen. The state was up to its eyeballs and killings. It was there were a lot of nefarious deeds done on behalf of the state. Evidence was doctored. The RUC was less than impartial. The British Army and like Captain Nerac and boys like that were involved in whatever. But it's all coming out now. But what good is it now?
Well, that's true. Maybe we're being idealistic. I always suspect I'm a bit idealistic, that I expect journalists, broadcasters like the BBC, the authorities to be fair-minded, even-handed, and seeking justice for those who deserve it. I've always believed that. I thought the older I get, the more I realize that's not the case. If you expect that, you're going to end up very disappointed. Okay, let's leave that one and move on to another one, which is this thing about, you're drawing a comparison between Ukraine, where the Russians have sent in drones and bombed places, and what the Israelis have been up to in Palestinian territory. Are you saying it's the same thing, essentially, or?
Yeah, I always have to put in this sort of background. I was a big Israeli supporter back in the day when I was many years ago, and because I worked on the basis that this was this little small nation surrounded by hostile Arabs, etc., 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 and it was brave little people and all the rest. I've come to realize that's totally Israelis. By the way, even in 1967, they claimed the Arabs attacked them. When you read the facts, they attacked the Arabs. They went first. They bombed all the Arabs, the airports. Right. Anyway,
they even have a term for that, Pat.
They did this.
They even have a term for it, the preemptive strike.
Preemptive strike. Yeah, that was their justification for. They bombed all these. Anyway, bottom line of all this, right? The whole Western world is saying Putin and Russians are absolutely evil, that they should be brought before the Human Rights Court. And when this is all over, if they get Putin, he will be like the people in Yugoslavia, or brought before the Hague for abuses of human rights. And rightly so, by the way, I agree with that 100%. They're bombing civilian targets, and they knowingly are bombing civilian. They're hitting apartment blocks. They know they are not army bases. They know they just want to kill as many innocent people as they can. Fair enough. But last night, the Israelis sent in to Jenin City drones, and at least apparently 5 Palestinians are dead. That's the second time they've done it in a week. Jude, where's the condemnation from Britain? Where's the condemnation from France, Germany, the US, anywhere? It's the Israelis.
There's nothing even handed about it. But there's nothing original.
Not in the least.
There's nothing
Yeah.
original about it either, because cast your mind back to the Second World War. I mean, the Germans bombed Coventry and other cities, London, and I mean, they weren't checking to see were there any civilians in it. They just bombed the cities.
Yeah.
The Brits bombed hell out of where was it?
Dresden.
Dresden, exactly. A famous book about that. But they bombed any number of places. And of course, we have Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which were intended to wipe out everybody and succeeded very well in doing so. So this notion that there's good guys who don't kill innocent people and there are bad guys who do kill them, and we're the good guys and they're the bad guys, is total rubbish. America's guilty, England's guilty, Germany's guilty, Israel's guilty. Any number of people are guilty. It all depends on how good your PR system is and how well you can persuade the people that you're fighting a just war. Which I find that impossible to justify. I really do. They say, for example, when they bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that they did that to end the war, because otherwise there'd been an awful lot of US casualties. Come on. We killed hundreds of thousands of Japanese on the conjecture that there might be more of our people killed. What? That's outrageous. Unspeakable. Unspeakable. Anyway, okay, let's move on to
but you know, another thing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You finish what you're going to say, Pat, and then we'll go on.
It's unbelievable that somebody can get away. You know, that the hypocrisy here is unbelievable. Like, why are we condemning one, but the silence in regard to the other? And by the way, a lot of reasonable people that you know and I know have no problem with this.
Yeah, and you know why? I think it's because the media have managed to brainwash them. The respectable, certainly right of centre press and media in Britain, and I'm sure in the States as well, presents the picture of Israel surrounded by its enemies, and that these enemies have terrorist groups like Hamas, and that they have to every so often try to elevate some of these people. And sometimes civilians get caught up in it. That's the picture that's sold, and that's the picture that people buy. I think there's some souls, pure souls like ourselves, Pat, who see through that. But it's amazing how many people...
saying Hamas are good guys. But if you check the record, the Israelis have stolen the land of the Palestinians. They have built illegal settlements. They have built an apartheid system. They introduced what they call administrative detention. They give a wee Palestinian can get 20 years for throwing a stone at an Israeli. The Israelis have shot dead Palestinians without without even spending a day in jail. An Israeli soldier, a Palestinian prisoner with his hands, he stabbed him and murdered him. He did something like 6 months in jail and came out to a hero's welcome. And they shot dead, remember, there quite recently, an Al Jazeera journalist, and originally claimed that there was a crossfire, and then it turned out they admitted that they muddied the waters for about 6 months by claiming she was caught in crossfire, and then they admitted quietly that they had shot her. Jude, there's no condemnation of any of that, and it's just and you sort of go, if the Palestinians were doing this to Israelis, the world would be going bananas.
That's right. But you see, they have this weapon that if people side or sympathize with the Palestinians, they must be anti-Semite. I watched, and I'd encourage everybody to watch, an excellent video on on YouTube called "Not the Andrew Marr Show." It has a whole series of little clips and interviews, but there was one with Alexei Sale, and he's talking about the way that Jeremy Corbyn was brought down. And he essentially says that it was a combination of right-wing forces in Britain itself, within political life, and Israeli pressures. In fact, he points out that not Jeremy Corbyn, but Keir Starmer was the DPP. Now, I was never very clear what the DPP was, but he talks about it as if they were quite close to the MI5 and MI6. Would that be right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, they're part of the same establishment.
Yeah. So he's saying essentially what you've got is, on the one hand, with the Tories, you've got Rishi, and he's hand in glove with Goldman Sachs and the finance world. And then on the other side, for Labour, it's led by a guy who smears Jeremy Corbyn, kicks him out when he was bringing in hundreds of thousands of new members on the grounds that, they're doing stuff, nasty stuff, or he's saying bad stuff about Israel. What a load of rubbish. And the amazing thing is that they were able to do it for a man who has spent most of his life fighting the cause of those who were downtrodden and who were suffering from injustice. There's no way that Jeremy Corbyn ever...
But you see, Jude, here's the thing. Any criticism, whatever, of Israel, justified or otherwise, is now deemed anti-Semitic, which is unbelievable. That's why I don't give a monkey shit, because I am saying categorically, Israel has now become a barbaric state. They are murdering right now. The day the Israeli or the Americans moved their embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, they shot dead 60 individually, shot dead around 60 Palestinian protesters. They injured somewhere around 12 to 1,600. It was viewed by the world, seen by the world. There was no criticism from the Americans, no criticism from the British. No, imagine, Jude, Bloody Sunday still rankles and still resonates here. That day, 50 to 60, I think around about 60 Palestinians were shot dead. Not, by the way, not one of them armed, not one of them convicted of anything, no whatever. Just that they were protesting and they were coming near the Israeli lines. The Israelis put their soldiers in bunkers and shot them one by one. And there was, I think it was 1,200, maybe 1,600. Jude, that's not propaganda to say that happened. The world saw it and nothing was done about it.
I think that teaches a lesson, and that is that might is right. If I was a Palestinian, you'd have a hard job convincing me that I should take a political path. I would be saying, well, what
that I should leave the West. Yeah.
Okay, that's a horrible, bloody topic. But anyway, let's go to one that's a wee bit more sort of civic rather than military. I think it's Una Mullally or somebody has an article in the paper today, the Irish Times, and she says that they should really have a hard look at O'Connell Street. They've got all this money now, and they should be, it's the main street of the capital of Ireland, and they could make it, I mean, it's a very handsome street, actually. But what mars it is the bloody shops on it, places for playing pinball and, amusements, and Summers sex shops. It's just tatty. And she's saying we should be standing back and seeing how can we, she says, for example, why we're looking for a home for the Dublin City Library. That wouldn't the ambassador, what was the ambassador cinema, make a perfect example of that? Couldn't they do that? And all sorts of other things they could do. I was thinking, why is it that we think so short term in terms of when we build stuff? We say, is this a nice building? Oh, it doesn't matter about what's around it, but just, is it nice? So we work with the individual thing. We never move back and look at things overall. The Brits do that all the time. They look at their villages and their towns and they develop them as a whole. We don't do that. And I'll tell you something else. When I was at UCD, I remember well, people like, she became a famous broadcaster. I think she's dead now. But there was a group of students who occupied buildings.
Marion Finucane.
That's a very woman, Marion Finucane, among others. I remember at the time thinking, a load of toffee-nosed snobs. Have they nothing better to do with their time? It's only now in my old age that I see, those are beautiful buildings. And to knock them down and put up some, steel and glass structure in its place was like knocking somebody's teeth out and putting, or as Prince Charles said, like a carbuncle on the face of a much-loved friend. But why is it that? Since there's no doubt about it, houses and areas where you live affect how you feel and how you live your life. I mean, if you're surrounded by ugliness, then, I think it has an impact on your way of thinking. And if you are surrounded by grace and beauty, which is just as easy to do if you take the time, that also enhances your life in a different way. Is that too idealistic?
Oh, Jude, I remember going to Dublin, and I wasn't a big, in fact, I think it was maybe 18 the first time I ever went to Dublin. But anyway, so I'm not back then. I wasn't a frequent visitor to our campus, but I remember walking down O'Connell Street back then. I thought it was beautiful, really did. And then I went to work in RT, and I've been back a couple of times since. And I'm told now, like, it's not personal experience, but you're taking your life in your hand when you walk down O'Connell Street at night. That there's guys, there's a considerable amount of drug taking. There's activities that are nefarious, to put it mildly, going on. That there have been muggings and so on. And there's a lot of these sort of takeaway cafes and as you say, whatever. Dude, this is supposed to be, to use your term, this is the capital city and the capital of our country, and it's supposed to be some sort of what would you say,
Showpiece.
shining example, and it's far from it. It's what do you say, Arjun?
I said showpiece. It should be
No,
a sort of a,
showpiece, yeah,
this is the best we
exactly.
have to
And
offer.
it's not.
Yeah.
And I think
Frozen
if
Pat.
it was the centre of London or the centre of, it would be sort of cleaned up and so on. You would think the GPOs there, you would think they would bring in maybe a museum there, some sort of exhibition centre, whatever. We really don't need sex shops, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and McDonald's.
Mm, mm. Should that be taught in school, Pat? Because nobody ever talked to me in school at any point about the idea of buildings being beautiful or ugly, about the idea of a set of buildings forming harmony or disharmony among themselves.
Yeah.
Nobody ever talked about making a street dignified and something you could be proud of, as distinct from somewhere where there are shops. Were you taught anything of that? Was that ever
I
covered?
told you, I have a friend. He became he's dead now, but he said he went to St. Eunice and Letterkenny the same time as I did, and he said he became a Catholic priest, by the way. And he said to me, I said, "Did we get educated at all?" He said, "What do you know about art?" And I said, "Very little." He says, "What do you know about classical music?" "Very little." And he says, "What do you know about painting or anything else?" "Next to nothing." Now, we did Latin and we did Greek and stuff like that, algebra and geometry, which I've never used in my life. But about appreciation of architecture or appreciation of classical music, or know nothing about it, Jude.
Well, I think the architecture in particular, like, I mean, I accept everything you say about classical music and so on, but you could argue, well, we can get other music we do like, but you're forced to confront architecture because it's literally all around you.
Exactly. It's there in front of you.
And yet we're never, not a hint is ever given that sort of some architecture is commendable, some architecture isn't. No idea.
Yeah.
As I say, there was what age would I be? About 23, 24, seeing these guys were snobs for daring to try to oppose the erection of new buildings in the middle of St. Stephen's Green, or the buildings around St. Stephen's Green. It's only now that you see it. That was a terrible lapse. And there's no sign that there's anybody going to do anything about it. Alec can write articles in the Irish Times if she wants to, but until you've got the will of the people saying, yes, let's do that, let's have a capital city with a main street, which we're really proud of, until that happens, nothing will ever change.
Yeah.
Okay, there's time for just one more, Pat, and it's interesting because you mentioned this man, Sean Doherty, who something you knew, because it matches with something in my experience. But you go on that.
Yesterday, I haven't been in an ordination in years. Sean Doherty was ordained yesterday, and it's a really strange story. Sean Doherty, he was born in Stoke in England. His father was from Donegal and his mother was from Derry. Now, Sean came back to live in Derry about 1988 or something around that time. Now, he had been a sort of jobbing actor and so on, and he got a job on a pirate radio station in Donegal originally. Now, I think his mother came back and she died quite young and so on, and Sean had looked after her and so on. Anyway, so he starts off in Donegal and he gets a job when pirate radios became legal. He got a job on Highland Radio. Now, it was a rare appointment for a guy to get a show on a guy with a broad English accent, no Stoke accent. But Sean there was a program on between 10 and 1 o'clock, and it became the sort of the gay burn show of this area. Sean Doherty became easily the most famous broadcaster in this, and he was listened to by all on Sunday. He's on some magnificent guests over the years, even a couple of Secretary of States from Northern Ireland. Brian Friel, who was a man of distinction and taste, publicly stated, and Brian was a very private man, but he said Sean Doherty was by far his favourite broadcaster and the whole Irish scene. So anyway, Sean was up there for about 20. He was basically the Nolan or the Gay Byrne or whatever you want to say of this area. Hey, one day he announced on air he was retiring. He was only in his late 40s, early 50s, whatever it was. And he was retiring and so on. And everybody knows there was a big speculation where he was going and all the rest, and he wouldn't say to anybody and all the rest. Next thing, fast forward maybe a year or two, we hear he's in a seminary, and I think it was Spain, and he was becoming a priest. I have a bit of a person. I used to do quite a lot of programs with Sean on Highland Radio, and I hadn't a clue, not a notion. So anyway, yesterday he was ordained priest, and it's a great story in a way, and he's a lovely fella, and it's just he wants to do something with his life, and from going from a public broadcaster to a Catholic priest, some change of direction and track, isn't it?
It certainly is. And let me tell you my story now. Yesterday, my wife spent the afternoon on a website, and she was watching an event in St. Peter's Church in Belfast. And it was the ordination of a man. And the man was a guy who was, I think, a science teacher or a maths teacher in the school where she worked. He was 70 years of age when he was ordained yesterday. What age was your man?
I'd say he's mid-50s. Just about.
Well, I suppose, I've sort of mixed feelings about that. I think you could look at it positively or negatively. You could say, here's somebody who realize what they want to do with the remainder of their lives. It is the remainder of their lives, most of their lives, even 58 or 60. And that's very commendable that you can do such a sharp handbrake turn on it. Another way of looking at it is, one of the big impediments, just to be blunt about it, about being a Catholic priest is celibacy. And celibacy, let's put it sort of lightly, is rather less pressing matter at the age of 58 or the age of 70 than it might be if you were 25 or 30. That's not to say I take off my hat to these guys. I have always liked people who make a stand on their own terms, and they say, no, this is what I believe. This is what I want to do. I know you don't believe it. You don't agree, but I want to do it, and I'm going to do it because I think that's the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. Sean could have stayed on broadcasting and had an easy run on earning good money, had a nice life, adored by the public, loved his own private life, etc. But he stopped it all. And as you said, took a stand. It's not going to be easy being a priest. You're going to be administering to the dying. You're going to be maybe call out the scenes of horrible accidents. I don't know what details and so on. But that's just the life he's chosen. I admire him tremendously for, it was a massive, massive decision for him. To give it all up and go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, our time is up now, Pat. I just wanted to leave you with this thought that we are doing a great deal of good as well. Never forget that. We do a great deal of quiet, good work every week. Twice.
God bless you, Father.
Okay. See you Thursday, Pat.